Hello again, Guyana, and welcome to the Public Interest. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us this week. This week, unfortunately, we have to discuss a topic that would have hurt many persons in society, especially our women. And our topic today comes at an opportune time. As you know, 2 weeks ago, I discussed with Brigadier David Granger. We talked about how he feels about women and the development and the progression and respect for women in our nation. Today, we're unfortunately focusing on the fact that a government minister has recently publicly tried to disgrace and embarrass a woman. With me, of course, is leader of the People's National Congress Reform. He's also the presidential candidate for a Partnership for National Unity, Alliance for Change, in the upcoming regional and general elections. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Sir, you know, I cannot repeat, and I would not, as a woman, repeat some of the things that Dr. Barry Ramsaran, some of the words that he recently used to describe a female women's rights activist, of course. Threatening physical abuse, threatening to slap the woman in addition to what he called her. Before we even discuss this issue of what seems to be the vulgarity in our nation, first of all, your thoughts on the incident.
The incident, unfortunately, is symptomatic of other things we've seen in the People's Progressive Party civic administration over the last 23 years. Although it is, I suppose, disappointing, in a way it's not surprising, because Dr. Ramsaran is part and parcel of the PPP civic, but he's also clearly an adherent to some type of low political culture that administration has become accustomed to. But the Guyanese people could never become accustomed to that. So I feel that it is typical of some of the PPP ministers, too many of the PPP ministers, and it's something that we can do without in Guyana.
What does it say to you when, I mean, it's wrong, it's something that's very wrong to do in a normal season, but what does it say to you when person who is not only a minister, he's a candidate, they're running for elections, they're asking Guyanese to vote for them, they're asking Guyanese women to vote for them. What does it say to you when that person is going to do that in a season such as this one?
It shows that the PPP is completely divorced from reality. They've been in government for 23 years, and they feel they can say and do anything to the people of this country. And I think if they were really concerned about public morals and public morality, they would be more careful in their, their relations with the public and, of course, the media. And it was a public event because the media was present. They seemed not to care. And this is typical of the behavior of the PPP. They've just been in power for too long, and they've just grown so arrogant that they feel that they're untouchable.
Unfortunately, a woman, education minister at that, Ms. Priya Manik-Chan, shortly after the verbal abuse, after the abuse was made public, used it to defend Dr. Ramsaran, saying that he was irritated, he was provoked. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I don't expect otherwise from Ms. Priya Manik-Chan. I didn't read those remarks myself, but she herself has made Guyanese history by being abusive. In the first instance, she used the four-letter word to describe a United States trafficking person report a few years ago when she was Minister of Human Services. And this was carried all over the media. And people were very astonished because she was a young mother, and they felt surprised that she would be using such language. But after that, she confirmed her vulgarity by going to the home of the United States ambassador and delivering what even Dr. Luncheon, her colleague in the cabinet, described as a feral blast. It was completely undiplomatic, completely uncalled for, and completely vulgar for a minister of the government. And then she walked away smiling. So there must be something in the PPP that makes its ministers behave in this way. And strange that Ms. Manik-Chan should come out and make that comment about Dr. Ramsaran's behavior, because she herself, is regarded as something of a vulgarian,
So this question might sound a bit ridiculous, but I'm now forced to ask. We already talked about two ministers, and we still have the president and a former president and another minister to go in terms of this vulgar behavior. Again, this may sound as though it's a ridiculous question, but is this some sort of policy? Do you believe that it's some sort of policy in the PPPC that they must behave in this manner to somehow show some sort of strength?
No, I don't know which community would be impressed by that display. What it seems is that they are people of low political culture, and they are reckless with the attitude or the behavior or the opinion of the public. As I said, they've been in power so long they feel they can say and do anything. But it also deals with, it also concerns their own political origins and what they've grown up accustomed to in the PPP. And I can't imagine, because most politicians would like to win the favor, win the support of the public, but these people don't care. They feel that whatever they say or do, they'll get back into office. So that is, I think that is part of the problem.
In saying all of that, let's come to Mr. Nandalal's, what we're calling sex solicitation phone conversation. Had he been sanctioned for that, do you believe that it would have somehow stopped Mr. Ramsaran from taking this recent path?
I do agree, yes. If when Priya Manichan described the United States trafficking person report as crap, if she had been stopped, if she had been removed from the cabinet, it would have sent a message to the public, but more important, it would have sent a message to her colleagues in the cabinet that you cannot abuse or use that quality language or that type of language in public. So I think the Manichan issue gave the green light, if you can call it that, to Ramsaran, but it also allowed Nandalal to carry on this vulgar conversation. In a way, I think all three of them are sort of drinking from the same cup, literally a cup, a PPP symbol, that Nandalal, Ramsaran, and Manichan all displayed public vulgarity. They're all ministers of the government, and they've not been sanctioned. So there must be some high degree of tolerance inside the PPP for this type of behavior. I don't know if they go into cabinet afterwards and pat each other on the back and say, well done. But the public that I'm accustomed to is really offended by that type of language. And it, as I said before, it shows a low political culture.
Let's talk about the two presidents now. One was accused of abusing his wife, in plain words, throwing her out. And another president, and this is not just an accusation, we all heard the recording, another president was heard saying that the same former president who threw his wife out would have slapped him. He would basically cheer on a former president for slapping a citizen. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think most of the problems we have in the present cabinet, the PPP cabinet, have arisen out of the behavior of Bar Jagdeo when he was president. And Bar Jagdeo seemed, in a perverse way, to use the Babu John annual commemoration of the death of President Jagan. It's usually held in March, as a forum for abuse. And he would call people names, he would tell lies, he would accuse people of all sorts of behavior without providing any evidence or any proof. And maybe because he was president at the time when Priya Manichan came in the cabinet, when Barry Ramsaran came in the cabinet, when Anil Nandalal came in the cabinet. So maybe, although he was president, all three of them were younger than he was, so they probably looked to him, even though he was young, maybe as a father figure. And he said, hey, if the president could get away with this, maybe we could try it too. So I regard him as the father of all abuse, because he has set a pattern, he's just set the tone of misconduct in the People's Progressive Party civic cabinet. And if you look back over the years at what Bharat Jagdeo has been saying at Babu John every March, it's painful but he seems to have no qualms, about shouting and abusing and carrying on. And he's obviously got a bad temper. And I think the younger ministers who came in, Ramsaran, Manikchand, and Nandalal, probably imitate him and feel, hey, we're doing it too, only a little better, or maybe a little worse, I should say.
And that indeed is sad. Sir, how has this PPPC cabinet vulgarity affected our nation?
Well, just look at the present president. He went to Aishalton last December, and I remember the date very well, the 3rd of December, because it so happened that it was the anniversary of his installation as president in 2011. So he went to Aishalton village almost exactly 3 years later, and the words he used indicated that he was a fan of Bar Jagdeo, because the questions that the young mathematics teacher had asked pertained to Bar Jagdeo's behavior. And he said, he called the man stupid. And he said, if Bar Jagdeo was here, he would have slapped you. And of course, this was followed up by a rail slap by the presidential guard. So it seems that the present president has taken his cue from the previous president, Bar Jagdeo, who he probably admires, and his guards, the presidential guard, now took their cue from the president. So it's obviously having a pernicious effect on the entire cabinet and the people around the cabinet, like the presidential guard. So we have here several ministers who have been openly abusive, but in addition to that, there are other ministers who've been dismissive of the public. And there are cases with Mr. Robeson Ben. I think there was a young man who was heckling him at Parika. And there are other incidents which indicate that the PPP cabinet has become arrogant and abusive. And this is the type of behavior we see, and this is the type of behavior which makes the PPP unsuited to remain in government in this country. This is a country in which the majority of people adhere to religious values. The majority of people are members of families. And what we see in this type of behavior is everything that is wrong about family life, everything that is wrong about morality.
Why should the women of Guyana, the children of Guyana, the public at large of Guyana believe that they will not experience this same sort of vulgarity from an APNU AFC cabinet?
Well, I don't think that the people in the APNU AFC, the people I associate with, would want to behave in such a vulgar manner. What we've seen from these two presidents and 3 or 4 ministers is vulgarian to the extreme. And it is a behavior that I've never come across inside of the APNU. So I don't think that the public should fear that they will be subjected to the type of vulgarity that we've seen here.
Okay, sir. And just to come back to where we began this conversation before we have to begin to wrap up, how would you use this recent incident? And it's not, I should jump in here and say that it's not only being used for political purposes, for political gain for APNU AFC. The fact is, women in our society, and even some men, are offended by what Dr. Ramsaran would have said. But sir, how would you use this to remind the people, to remind our citizens, to remind our women why it is important to not give the People's Progressive Party Civic their vote come May 11, 2015?
Well, the evidence is there. It is plain that the PPP ministers are, those that we've referred to are vulgarian, that they would project the same lack of values in the cabinet functions. And this probably explains to a great degree, more than people have realized before, why this country, why this government is so incompetent. Because they have no political culture. They have no respect for the public.
Okay, and finally, sir, are you in support of, or do you accept what many of us are calling a so-called apology by Mr. Ramsaran that really came from his office via a piece of paper?
That was no apology. I don't accept it. I think that if he wanted to express his regret, he should have done that in completely remorseful language. And what he did there was not an apology. I don't accept it.
Thank you, sir. Very well said.